And we're live. Good evening, everyone. This is Matt Carty, Sinn Féin MEP. This is the European Parliament in Brussels. This isn't the RTE news. So we've made it to our third Facebook Live discussion event. This is the first from Brussels. We started off about a month ago when we had our first one, and it was an idea that we had that if we could get 1,000 people to watch, it would be the equivalent of organising 10 public meetings with 100 people each. So we decided to give it a go. We had 2,500 viewers for our first programme. 2 weeks ago, we had our second programme and we reached 8,800 viewers. So I think the secret of it was we had a competition for a free mug for one of the people who shared our post. So we got lots of people, and we're going to have a raffle for the first people, for the first mug tonight. But again, if you hit share, hit like, hit whatever it takes in order for all your friends to see that you're watching. So basically, for those people who are new to the programme, it's an informal discussion, bit of chat about some of the big and small political issues of the day. We want you to participate. That's why it might look sometimes like we're being rude if we're looking at our tablets, but what we're actually trying to do is see if you have any comments or questions coming in, because we have a really busy panel, but it's absolutely fantastic panel. I'm really excited because among us tonight is a hero of mine, Paddy Hill. Paddy, one of the Birmingham Six. He's attending an event in the European Parliament that's organised by Lynn Boylan with the Say I'm Innocent campaign that's shown as we speak at the beginning of the BBC documentary Fallout. So I'm really proud that Paddy's joining us. We're also delighted to welcome two guests from the United States of America who are here because a GUI NGL organised conference that is, do we say commemorating or celebrating the first year of the first year of President Trump. So Winnie, Wong, no stranger to people in Ireland now because you were in Dublin at the weekend. Winnie represents the People for Bernie Sanders campaign, and David Dulhalde, am I pronouncing that?
Yeah, close enough, yeah.
Yeah, it's near enough. He's from the Democratic Socialists of America. There was a time I didn't know there was Democratic Socialists in America, but now here we are. So we're learning something new. And we're also joined, as we always do, we try to have a member of our own staff. Siobhán Mulvey is all the way from lovely Leitrim. She works with me here in Brussels, so we're going to try and get a chat with Siobhán. Because the panel is so big, we mightn't just have a full time to get to the background of what a woman from Leitrim does in Brussels, but if not, we'll have her back on again. So listen, this has been another really busy week. We've seen further evidence, if it were needed, of the lengths that the super wealthy will go to avoid paying their taxes. We hope to have a show dedicated to that subject maybe next week. It's also the week that a Fine Gael senator thought it would be appropriate to send somebody from Ballymurphy a poppy celebrating the actions of the British Army, obviously blissfully unaware of the Ballymurphy massacre in which 11 innocent people were murdered by that same British Army.
One of them was a Catholic priest and the other one was a pregnant woman.
That's right. And it's also been a week where we learned that the Independent Alliance, not only content with their victories in propping up our right-wing government in Ireland and forcing our public transport workers onto the picket lines and bizarrely confirming the marital status of prospective female employees, they've now set their sights on resolving the impasse between Donald Trump and the North Koreans. So what could possibly go wrong? Anyway, let's get to our guests. So we have in around a half an hour of discussion, and as I say, please send your comments. I see loads coming through. But Paddy, I have to say it's an absolute honour to be in the same building as you. I remember as a teenager, the Birmingham Six campaign was massive.
Oh, yeah.
It was one of the things that ignited my just interest in terms of the injustices that are carried out in the world. But I'm just conscious, we obviously have a lot of young people watching through Facebook.
Yeah.
Some people wouldn't be aware of even what happened to you. Would you just explain your own story as briefly as you can?
Yeah, well, on the night of the 21st, 3 members of the Provisional IRA in Birmingham planted 2 bombs in 2 public houses in the city centre. And we were on our way home. James McDade, who blew himself up at Coventry. I went to school with James McDade and what have you.
You were on his way to his funeral?
Yeah. And when we got to the boat, That's when we found out, I'd already gone through security.
Yeah.
My only regret is that I didn't have the video camera with me, and through cops, like, you know.
Yeah.
Because I have no respect to the cops. I've been in the hands of the police since when it went to Birmingham, 1960.
You would have been at the tail end of...
Oh, yeah. So
there would have been a lot of anti-Irish sentiment to begin with.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And, of course, I went to a police station of my own free will, at Morecambe Police Station, to be eliminated from inquiries. And we were all eliminated from the inquiries because T14 and the Special Branch and all the rest of them in Northern Ireland, all the security forces and their intelligence forces told the Morecambe Police to let us go. They knew all about us. They said that we were not involved in any republicanism or any IRA activities. But of course that changed when the Birmingham Police came on the spot. And the Birmingham Police told us right from the beginning that they knew we had nothing to do with the bombings. But they turned around and said they didn't care. They had their orders, and their orders were, and he pointed at the ceiling and he said, "You've been selected by members at the highest level of government, and they give us our orders." And he pulled my head back and he says, "Here, read, look what it says there." And their orders were that they were to get confessions and convictions, and they were to use any means that they had to obtain them. Don't worry, you're covered all the way to the top. And that's exactly how it turned out.
So you ended up in prison for something that you knew nothing about?
Yeah, I got 21 life sentences.
And you served?
16 and a half years in prison. Maximum security, double category Irish. It
was, I presume, a horrendous experience.
Oh yeah, well I was lucky in one respect because I'd been in jail before. So, like, you know, plus I knew lots of people.
But there's a difference when you're locked up for something that you had no knowledge of, let alone.
You just walk up and down the cell at night like a caged lion, and you keep asking yourself why you're there.
I'm sure the 16 years, some of those 16 years must have felt like decades in themselves.
Oh yeah, like sometimes when I look back, it seems like forever. And there's other times
you can still have vivid memories of it.
Oh yeah, I still have nightmares over it. I can't forget the mock executions, etc. They knocked all my teeth out with a gun.
How does someone get over that?
You don't get
released, what year was it?
1991, 14th of March.
I remember watching the TV screens. As I say, I was only a teenager, and it was just one of the, because you knew of the campaign that was building. I remember when campaigners who were saying that you were innocent were laughed at. They were ridiculed.
Exactly.
And all of a sudden these...
We're all called IRA supporters and what have you, Marxists and left-wing this and left-wing that, you know.
The truth were, they were a lot of them Marxists. And initially they were the only people who
were speaking up for us, even in Parliament. And the good thing about it was when Sir John Farr came on the scene, I was at Margaret Harbour at the time, and he come to see me and what have you, and that changed the whole thing around.
Yeah, I remember reading, was it Chris Mullen's book?
Yes, Hour of Judgment.
Powerful stuff.
Yeah.
And that was because he was an MP at the time.
No,
he wasn't an MP at that time.
What it all started over was, I had a letter, Shane Paul O'Doherty helped me to formulate, like I used to write letters out to people, but honest to God, like it was nice the first paragraph or so, and then they come in and everything come out, like, you know, I was ranting and swearing in it. So Shane Paul O'Doherty said to me, "You can't do that." So anyway, we formulated a letter for a thing, and McGill magazine was the first one to print it, and then it was picked up by the Irish newspapers. And Chris Mullen was the editor of the Labour Party paper, the Tribune, and he printed it in the Labour Party. And then he come to see me in the jail, and that's when it started. And of course, as I say, Sir John Farr, Conservative, he was the first person to come and sit down and talk to me.
That's amazing, isn't it, really, in one way?
Oh, yeah. Sir John Farr was brilliant. And, of course, when he got up in the Houses of Parliament to speak, they couldn't turn around and say that he was an IRA supporter, or a Marxist or anything. So that made it easy for the rest of the MPs to say the same.
So, like 1991, it seems in many ways like such a long time, but as you say, like the scars must be there.
Oh, yeah. It never leaves you 24/7. You know, when I first come out, if you'd have told me the day I got out that I couldn't handle the outside world, I'd have laughed in your face.
You were all ready to face it,
maximum security prison in England are like, they're like war zones. 7 o'clock in the morning, the door opens, welcome to the killing field, because you don't know what's going to happen. And half of the people, like when I was in Parkhouse, 68.4% of the people in Parkhouse were in for mental disorders. And half of them were like Broadmoor, Rampton, Carstairs, etc. You know, so that's the way it was. Like, you live on your nerves 24/7. And that's it. You don't get over it, you know. No way.
But it is incredibly important that you have the ability and are articulate to share that experience, because so many people wouldn't be aware, as I say, and people forget. This was systematic. This was about sending a message as much to the Irish community in England. Keep your head down.
Yeah, that was it. The Irish community was completely isolated. Yeah. Even English people who were good friends with the Irish turned their backs on them. Yeah. And that's the way it was, So
do you want to explain what you're doing in the European Parliament today?
Well, we've done a documentary with Mark McLaughlin, and we're advocating for things. First of all, we want the same privileges that the guilty people get.
On release?
Yeah, like the guilty people, there's a number of organisations set up by the government, Unlock, Hope, Sacro, etc., etc. And of course, I've been to them all. Yeah. And they can't help me. And the reason why they can't help me is the government...
Because your conviction was overturned?
No, because the government remit and the money that funding they get from the government can only be used for the resettlement and the rehabilitation of guilty offenders. And because we're innocent, they can't take a box, so they can't help us.
That's amazing.
And there's no help or support, even though the British government, we have it in writing, that they have a duty of care for us. But they don't do nothing. Once we get thrown out of the Court of Appeal, the criminal justice system wipes its hands off us.
So you need support from the European Parliament and from elected representatives in order to put in place?
I've been fighting for 20-odd years to get a trauma centre set up. Unfortunately, like up in Scotland, I went to see Peter Randall, and he's the head of the West Coast Trauma and Psychiatric Department. Yeah. And I spent 2.5 hours with Peter. And after 2.5 hours, he just looked at me and he said, "Paddy, I'd love to help you, but unfortunately, I don't know what the hell to do with you." He said, "I haven't got anybody in my health service that can actually help. With the experience and knowledge to treat me so badly traumatised." And then I went to over to the East Coast of Edinburgh, and I seen Professor Chris Fields, who's the head of all of Scotland. And again, I spent 2 hours with him. And he told me the same thing. He hadn't got anybody in the Scottish Health Service that could treat me. So that was it. And then I ended up going down to Capley Nightingale in 2011.
And the same story?
Yeah, they offered me a month with Gordon Turnbull, who counselled the...
So this is 20 years after you were released?
Yeah. Okay. I went down there for a month in the Capley Nightingale. Gordon Turnbull was the fellow who'd done Terry Waite and the Beirut hostages, etc. Yeah. And I only lasted a day and a half.
Well, Paddy, listen, you're very welcome to the European Parliament, and it's brilliant for others who have been through the experience that you have and who don't have the wherewithal to be able to advocate that you're doing that on their behalf. I just wonder, Siobhán, you're a young woman compared to the rest of us. No disrespect to anybody, but because, as I said, when I was young and in Ireland, like the Birmingham 6, it was just reaching a crescendo when I was going into secondary school. So, but does your generation, would you be aware of the Birmingham 6 and the Guildford 4, the Maguire 7, all of those miscarriage of justices that were so prevalent back then?
Not so much. So when you were released, that was 5 years before I was born.
That's scandalous. I'm barring you from any further.
So I didn't watch it on the TV. Yeah. But
so historically, would it be part of the discourse in terms of, in the way in which I suppose the outbreak of the Troubles I'd have been aware of them, even though it happened before I was born. So you wouldn't have heard of Paddy before tonight or before?
No.
Okay, that's interesting. Amazing how things can just move on to that there are these defining moments. I'm just going to go through some comments before I move on to our other guests. A lot of really good, nice comments towards yourself, Paddy. I'm just seeing if there's any questions. Any opinion on Leo Varadkar wearing the poppy? We'll come back to that if we have time at the end. Lots of people just saying that they're tuning in. Okay, I don't think there's any major questions there. Just who else would you like to send with Lord Ross and his buddies to Korea? Answers on a postcard who you want to go over to Korea with our Independent Alliance members. Okay, so we'll try and come back to some of the questions and comments. But David and Winnie, you're both very welcome. David, a big night last night in terms of the US elections. for those uninitiated among us, what happened?
Sure. Well, first, let me thank Paddy for sharing your story. My father was a political prisoner in Chile, so I know
Really?
it takes
Under Pinochet?
Yeah, under Pinochet.
Okay.
It takes a lot of courage to share those moments he doesn't talk about. I mean, he's very politically active, but doesn't talk about it, so it's hard to share the
If we knew that, we could have had a whole conversation.
well, we could maybe next
yeah,
maybe
please,
next time.
God, yeah.
But the elections, but now shifting to
Yeah.
the less serious in certain ways. So the United States, the way our elections are structured is our federal elections are every 2 years in even number years.
Yeah.
And then so certain states and cities, if they want, host elections in odd number years. And they tend to be much fewer than what will happen next year. But what is important for everyone, whether it's true or not, is everyone says that after a presidential election, the immediate election is kind of a test for the president.
Yeah, so it's a forebearer.
Yeah, forebearer, whether or not the president or the incumbent party is actually on the ballot. So the two major state elections were in New Jersey and Virginia. But I think I was even reading in the Financial Times, I mean, everyone's eyes were really on Virginia. And the reason why was that it really kind of was a proxies for Trump versus...
Trump won it, yeah.
For the centrist agenda. So there was Ed Gillespie, who was the Republican who had come from the establishment, was running on keeping the Confederate statues, which is a controversy in our country right now, where lots of people like Winnie and I and lots of other people want to take down the Confederate statues as symbols of racism and white supremacy. And he also attacking immigrants. There's large legal immigrant communities, but who they were kind of lumping in with gangs. And the centrist Democrat, Northam, who won the primary against a very progressive man that Bernie had supported, kind of had been wishy-washy on these two issues. But despite that, Northam came out and prevailed, and kind of it shows that Trumpism, at least in certain ways, is on the recline. What I would say is that doesn't mean necessarily that centrist Democrats are the answer. I think it's just that the Republican brand is so toxic. So I think the Washington Post yesterday reported that, I mean, in a generic poll, if you just had Democrats versus Republicans, the Democrats are now up by 10, which is their largest point spread in almost a decade. So it just shows that I think there's a general anti-Trumpism. And what's been exciting for us in the left is that last night there were nearly a dozen socialists elected, throughout the country, including two who DSA had nationally supported, with all of whom had had the backing of Bernie Sanders, Our Revolution organization, either locally or nationally. And most exciting for us, and also in the state of Virginia, was the way the parties are structured. There's the party leader and the whip, and the Republican whip was actually defeated by a Democratic socialist ex-Marine.
So when you take all these developments, what does it mean then in terms of the campaign leading into next year, which is obviously, I suppose, national campaign, and then 2020?
Yeah, well, I'm definitely curious to hear what Winnie has to say about that. But I think what I will say is that I think there's still going to be a lot of tension, and this in a healthy way, between the centrist Democrats and the more progressives and the socialists, who are going to be vying for who can win primaries, because there's going to be a big swing against the Republican Party, I assume.
Yeah.
And so some of these Democratic primaries may be the general elections, and it's going to be critical for progressives to stick to our guts, and because I think the cleavages within the Democratic Party and outside, like groups like People for Bernie and DSA are like outside the Democratic Party, but always looking in and building relations to really push, and that we can't just fall for the anybody but Trump or kind of rhetoric, which we've kind of liberals.
Which happens in Europe quite a bit.
Oh, I'm sure it happens.
So
it's just the first past the post system. So I think that's a very exciting time. It's still a very dangerous time. The Republicans still have a lot of money and a lot of support, But I'm very hopeful for the next year.
I suppose to you, Winnie, do you have any comments in terms of what David was talking about? Because I want to talk to you a bit about European politics and just your impressions.
Sure.
But
I agree with David wholeheartedly. He is correct. The Republicans are actually very well financed at the moment. They've outraised the Democrats by huge amounts. They currently have in the RNC coffers something like $100 million, which will be used to fund the 2018 elections and to sort of build more capacity toward, the enlarging of Trumpism. So, and the Democrats are actually quite fragmented right now, and there are, faction fights. There's a Bernie faction, and then there's like a Hillary faction, and we are trying to come together and create unity.
I have a question here, and if you have a one-word answer, will Sanders run again?
I mean, I hope he does.
Okay.
I hope he does, sure. I mean, Bernie would have won. Bernie 2020. Hindsight is 2020.
Yeah, so Bernie's...
Yeah. I hope he does. I hope he does. Well, certainly, David and I will certainly be...
Sorry, Paddy, yeah.
Let me ask both of you a question.
Yeah.
Trump's been elected president a year ago.
Yeah.
Do you think the world is a safer place or a more dangerous place since he took over?
Oh, without question, it's a more dangerous place. America has certainly become a much more dangerous place.
Exactly.
We've seen a dramatic increase in hate crimes across the country, and young people in high schools are starting to turn on each other. So that, to me, is very worrisome. We had like a decade of relative sort of peace in not peace, but like, I mean, it was a stabilized society for the most part.
Stabilized, yeah.
Stabilized society, yeah. But now I'm hearing reports of friends who have like relocated to, say, Texas, right? Who like live in Texas now, who say, oh, I was just at a Target and I saw a hate crime. Like, it's very normal to see hate crimes occurring across America now, and that's really a symptom of
I might just come back to that, Winnie, because there's actually quite a number of questions coming in on that, interesting ones. But I just wanted to get your sense as somebody who's involved in a massive campaign. US campaigns are they're phenomenal when you're looking from a country like Ireland. But you were in Dublin at the weekend. You attended the Right to Change conference there. I'm just wondering, did you take away any impressions of the political picture in Ireland, or do you have any views?
Yes, so just a shout out to the organisers of Right to Change for inviting me.
Hope you're all
Dave,
watching.
I know. If you're watching, Dave, thanks so much for bringing me there, and I hope I see you in France in 2 weeks. Ireland's current financial picture is something that like the Trump campaign is trying to achieve. Like, he is actually actively trying to create the same thing that Ireland has. And so what I found out was that Apple owes the Irish people many billions of dollars.
19 billion, yeah.
$19 billion. And so to me, that's shocking, right?
And a radio interview, I was doing an interview this morning, and the presenter asked me, he goes, but what about the jobs they created? There's 5,000 jobs in Apple. I said to the presenter, well, me and you, we're not economists, we're not entrepreneurs, we're not innovators, but give us 19 billion, I reckon we'd be able to create 5,000 sustainable jobs.
So I mean, so they're really trying to lower in America, Trump's government is actively trying to give more power to corporations by essentially saying, look, we're going to like cut your corporate tax rate to mirror that of Ireland's corporate tax rate.
But do you see anything in, like the Right to Change, like the defeated water charges, which it was a huge political achievement in terms of by mobilising all of the parties who had that position, and by mobilising communities. Do you see signs of hope, or is there any familiarity when you're looking at organisations like Right to Change and the left in Ireland in terms of how we can respond against I suppose the current political situation?
Well, Right to Change is supported by some of the trade unions, and to my understanding, union participation in Ireland is at over 28%, or just at about 28%, which is actually higher than union participation in the States.
Nearly 3 times.
Yeah, 3 times higher. So, and what we're doing in the States is we're funding campaigns like Fight for 15, and then of course National Nurses United, which is a union that supported Bernie and supports the work of People for Bernie, and also the work of Democratic Socialists of America. They are really leading on the Medicare for All campaign. And so I think what this says is that trade unions around the world actually need to give capacity to campaigners and activists around the front lines of these social justice fights, right? Give them the resources that they need, give them the staffing that they need, and help them build capacity and build institution and build organization around these critical issue fights. So unions are our last line of defense against
as I said to you yesterday when we were having just an earlier conversation, a lot of us looked on almost stunned at the success of the Bernie Sanders campaign. Somebody who declares themselves as a socialist becoming a serious contender in a presidential primary in the United States. Like, just from people a step removed, it was almost hard to believe that it was possible. I'm just wondering, because you've been in Ireland, you've spent the day at a GUI NGL conference meeting left-wing party. Is there anything that we here in Europe should be learning from the Sanders campaign?
Yes.
And what is it? Give us the secret.
think that the European left is very theoretical and academic in its approach. And I think that and again, each party has, cultural identifiers. And so we can't tell you to model your campaign, your political campaign around the Bernie Sanders campaign because not everybody is going to want to knock on doors,
And
right?
well, you have different electoral systems as well.
We have different electoral systems. I mean, it's a parliamentary system here, and we have two parties, and it's a non-parliamentary system.
Yeah.
But I think that the possibility of making sure that the people of your countries actually do something to affect change, is necessary. You have to ask people to participate in your campaigns, to do something, to organize.
Yeah.
You can't just expect them to turn out and vote.
I'm just being told by the guys that we only have a few minutes left. Siobhán, as somebody listening to the debates today and somebody engaged, you're obviously a political activist yourself. Are we on the right direction in terms of the progressive forces here in the European Parliament, or the left direction? I confused myself, but are we doing the right things, do you think?
Yes, but very slowly.
It takes a while. What I want you to do, if you would, open that ticket. You do the raffle there. We just want to see who won a mug. Let us know. Take out any one of them.
Do I do the big reveal?
You do the big reveal. We want to see who won the mug from last week. So remember, hit share. We want to get this. We have to beat 8,800 views, Paddy. What's the name?
Okay, Colette Nolan.
Colette Nolan, you're won a mug. We'll get in touch with you via Facebook. We'll find out how we can get that to you. And likewise with this one, keep liking, keep sharing. Paddy, do you follow international politics yourself?
Yeah. I keep an eye on it, you know.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, I have to say, you're an absolute legend, and we're delighted to be here. So just a few things before we finish. We launched, as I informed you we were going to last week, this Future of the Eurozone document that Emma Clancy has authored. Really good document. I'd encourage you to have a read over it. If you don't have time to read the full document, we've a video diary completed of the launch of the event itself with Thomas Fazzi, the Italian economist and author, Tom Healy from the Neary Institute in Ireland, and Emma herself explains it. Hopefully that'll whet your appetite and you'll want to read the full document, which is available on our website. We're coming back next week, hopefully. Siobhán, if we can get the booking for the Vox Box from Strasbourg. As I say, I want to do a programme on the whole issue of tax avoidance and tax evasion and calling Bono the gangster out, and we're going to raffle another mug.
Why does he need a mall? I actually want to know. I want to ask the Irish people.
He's basically,
I really need to know.
He's a shopkeeper in Lithuania.
Why does Bono need a mall in Lithuania? Let us know. Tweet at us at DSA and also at People for Bernie. Tell us why Bono needs them all.
It's just a simple grocer from Dublin.
It didn't take him long taking his money out of Ireland and going to Denmark.
Well, that's what happens.
Once he had to pay proper tax, he did all them concessions before that for 7 years.
Yeah.
And then
you've been paying attention, Paddy.
You better believe.
Bono, we're watching you. We know what you're up to. So hopefully we'll have a full show on that. Listen to Paddy. Thank you very much. To Winnie, to David, to Siobhán. We're going to come back. I want to just finish off by saying continued solidarity to our friends in Catalonia. In case you're wondering, this wasn't the RTE News. We'll talk to you later.